Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Today I want to talk about one of the worst arguments you'll hear in the drug policy debate. And unfortunately, even though I've got a quote on this one, this isn't the only guy saying this stuff. Lots of people bandy this argument around as if it was a good argument, and it's really awful. So let's look at the quote and then we'll talk about it.
The police dog discussion of all that and retraining, what's going to cost our local law enforcement agencies who've done these dogs, who've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on these dogs to get these dogs drug trained, and now they're going to have to be retired. That's a big issue. I was the mayor of Faribault and actually did a fundraising campaign to raise money to get a police dog, to have a drug dog, and now that money is going to go away because these dogs can't be used anymore given that. So there's a huge cost there.
So just to explain this a bit, once you've got a police dog that is trained to detect a variety of drugs and you legalize one, there's a bit of a problem because the dog, the way it works is it's trained to detect a number of substances and to provide a signal if it detects one of those. And so if one of those substances becomes legal, the value of that signal drops to basically nothing because now you don't know if it's signaling for an illegal activity or a legal one. Picture a dog that was trained to detect cocaine and heroin and fentanyl and marijuana and also cheese. And so if that dog gives a signal that says, hey, there's something in this car, well, sure, it could be heroin, but it could also be cheddar cheese. And at that point, you're not going to be able to search that car on the basis of maybe it's got cheese in it or maybe it's got drugs. That's not super useful. So once we legalize one of those substances, if marijuana stops being an illegal substance, then this dog is no longer able to function as a drug dog. It's not able to really do that purpose. And so in that sense, the dog may have to be retired. Now I should note here, retired doesn't mean that like it goes off to, the vet to be put down. Retired police dogs are going to live out the rest of their lives. They're typically adopted by usually the officer who works with them, but if not, they get adopted out. They just live dog lives after that. And, they may have various, they're just dogs, right? They'll do things that dogs do. They'll run in the park. They'll sniff crotches. They'll bark. All of these things. So when you think about it that way, retirement isn't really a terrible fate for the dog. In the same way that if somebody came and said, hey, Runkle, you have to retire this week, you're going to have the same lifestyle and be able to do all the things you like, you just won't have to work anymore. I'm not feeling super upset. So this is not a terrible thing for the dogs. But he raises the issue of the cost. And it takes about $12,000 to $15,000, according to Google searches, to train a police dog. Well, okay, that's a lot of money, especially if you've got several dogs. But it's not going to take long to recoup that cost because it takes about $45,000 to keep somebody in jail for a year. And so if we're not jailing people over marijuana, then we pay for those dogs really quickly. It doesn't take a whole lot of person weeks of jail time to cover the cost of training a police dog. So overall, in terms of the finances, the money is best off on the legalization side. And now you're going to get some pushback on that because of budget issues. Question becomes, who gets this money? Police department would really like for the money to be their money, whereas corrections would really like that money to be their money. And, where does this go? So there's always going to be some issues just because of people trying to protect their budgets. But I don't think the money argument here makes sense. And it's, as mentioned, it's not terrible for the dogs. Well, there is going to be an adaptation period because, of course, it might take some time to train those new dogs up. That, I think, is a decent argument and suggests that, hey, if you're going to legalize something, maybe you should say we're going to legalize it and wait however long it takes to train a round of dogs. Fair ball, right? Say, hey, we need some time to do this. Or just say, hey, we'll just have to do ordinary police work without the dogs in the meantime. It's also not the case that these dogs necessarily become useless because there's all sorts of places where even if marijuana becomes legal, that they will still be trying to detect it. For instance, Airports. Even if they legalize marijuana in the US, they're probably still going to want to check it at airports to make sure that somebody's not taking a whole bunch of it to a country that you're not allowed to. Prisons. Even if they legalize it there, I mean, alcohol is legal in Canada and the US, but you still can't bring a whole bunch of it into a jail. There's all sorts of places, but there is something to note here, which is that officers and the dogs are a bonded pair. Like, you train the officer with the dog. You can't just kind of give the dog away and still have it as a working police dog. That's not really, sort of a thing. So in that case, we'd be talking about moving the officers, and the officers may not want to move. They've got a nice job on drug enforcement doing wherever. They may not want to transfer that. But this one just makes no sense in the sense, if you're arguing the economics are in favor of legalization. If you're arguing harm to the dogs aren't harmed. It's the only real thing here is that if you think that legalization is a good idea in the first place, then everything is in favor of going ahead and doing it. If you don't, then this is the kind of argument that might seem like a good argument. It might seem like you're making a useful point here and that you're really, somebody's got to look out for these dogs, but really it's just a bad argument. There's all sorts of disagreements we can have about what kind of society we want to live in, whether we think that this is going to improve things or make things worse. All of those are arguments we can have. It's just we should really get the dumb arguments out of the way and make room for the better arguments, make room for the more interesting discussions about, all of those things about social policy and so forth. So, yeah, even if I agreed that that drug prohibition was a good idea, and I don't, that's not where I land. I actually think that trying to ban things ends up with more violence in our society, that it overtly makes things worse. We can look at the example of alcohol prohibition, but I would much rather be responding to better arguments than stuff like this. This is just silly season. All right, well, thank you for watching. Please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to see more content. Let me know in the comments below what you think, because I know that there's a lot of people who might disagree. Drug policy is a controversial subject, but I don't see, at least on marijuana, I don't see the justification. And I say this as a Canadian. The experience here in Canada with marijuana legalization has been almost universally positive. It's gone from, an operation for organized crime to something where you buy it at a shop that's right next to the liquor store. It's really, I think, been a positive experience in Canada, but yeah, still a lot of growing pains, still a lot of people figuring it out. I will note that both in Canada and the US, there was time periods before the war on drugs. This hasn't always been the case. And when we look at stuff that was going on before that, it also wasn't a big problem there. The reasons why drug policies were pushed in terms of bans were typically not great reasons in the first place. Anyway, thank you very much. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level: CCFR, David Michaud, Canada's National Firearms Association, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. At the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited and Jane Babe and Luxor. And at the $20 level, Lindsay Metcalf, Kyle Fox, Haywire, Gerald to the Bailey, Cameron Johnson, Andrew Elsich, and Vicky. Thank you as well to my $10 supporters who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching. I hope this has armed you with knowledge. See you next time.